This course is sponsored by USAA. We would like to thank USAA for their generosity in making this course possible.
Hi, my name is Patricia Watson, and I'm a Senior Educational Specialist at the National Center for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder at the Department of Veterans Affairs. I'd like to talk with you today about stress first aid. This is a model that was developed initially for service members in the Navy and Marine Corps. This model was developed based on a wide body of literature, and the Navy and Marine Corps asked us to develop it because they realized that service members needed a model for peer support and self-care that made sense and gave simple and practical ways to take care of themselves and their stress reactions. The hope is that stress first aid preserves well-being and prevents further harm, and it is designed in such a way that it can be used whenever it's needed for self-care or to help others who you care for. The model is based on 5 essential elements that were identified for immediate and midterm intervention after looking at a wide body of literature. And this body of literature was examining different types of adversity, post-trauma, post-loss, across many different settings and situations. We had an expert panel review this literature and find that there were 5 core essential elements that seemed to carry across many different situations and be related to better recovery from trauma, loss, and adversity. These 5 elements are a sense of safety, an ability to calm yourself or have others calm you, a sense of connectedness with others, a sense of self-efficacy or the ability to handle adversity and feel like you can cope with situations no matter how hard they are. And lastly, a sense of hope. So the stress first aid model ends up looking like this. When we introduced it into the Navy and Marine Corps, we added 2 other elements, check and coordinate. The 7 C's of stress first aid were titled that so that it would be easier for people to remember these 7 core actions. The first of the core actions is check. And this is an ongoing assessment, observing, listening, and looking to try to see what is needed and what's going on with the person that you're checking on, whether that be somebody else or yourself. The second core action is coordinate. And this is the ability to get additional help, to coordinate with other resources to help yourself or the other person. Next, we have the 5 core actions that I just identified. Cover is helping a person to reestablish a sense of safety. Calming is just as it sounds, being able to calm, slow down, or refocus the person so they're able to function better. Next is connect, getting support from others and helping the person get connected to different types of social support. The next core action, which was previously called self-efficacy, is now called competence, to restore a person's sense of effectiveness or their ability to handle what's going on around them. And lastly, the last core element of hope has been renamed confidence, to help restore a person's self-esteem and their sense of hope in the world and in the situation around them. So the stress first aid model, when it was originally introduced, was built upon the foundation of something that the Navy and Marine Corps had developed called the stress continuum model. And this model was designed to acknowledge that people are generally cycling in and out of different zones of stress reaction. The stress continuum model is also an acknowledgement that everyone can cycle in and out of these 4 zones of stress reaction, and therefore there's no need to have as much stigma as is sometimes assigned to having a stress injury or illness. Generally, people will go in and out of these zones on a regular basis, and therefore to say that you're in the red zone does not mean that it's a permanent state that carries with it as much stigma as people sometimes attach to that state of being ill with stress. So let me describe quickly the stress continuum model. Within the green zone, this is where you see people being fully functional. They're at their best, they're well-trained, they're prepared, they feel in control, and they feel fit, both mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Generally, they're motivated, they feel calm and steady, maybe even having fun, and they're behaving ethically. As we cycle into the yellow zone, people can often identify that they have mild or transient distress, or maybe a little functional impairment where they're not functioning as well as they'd like to. Usually in the yellow zone, this type of stress reaction goes away. It's generally of low risk. It can be caused by any stressor in a person's life. And what you see with people in this zone is they might be irritable, they might feel a little anxious or down, they may not feel as motivated or focused. Often we see that people have difficulty sleeping because of their worry about certain things in their life. Maybe they have muscle tension or physical changes, and they're generally not having fun in this zone. This zone is typically more transient. As we get into the orange zone, we find that you see more persistent distress or impairment. You'll see a person describing this as something feels different about me. It almost feels like an emotional or mental scar. And usually we see a higher risk with this zone than people that are in the more transient yellow zone. When you get into the orange zone, usually we see more significant causes for people being in this zone. So whereas the yellow zone could be caused by any type of stress, in the orange zone you typically see either a build-up and a cumulative effect from all of the yellow zone stress, all the different types of stressors in a person's life. And we call that a wear and tear injury. But we also see that connected with more severe types of stressors such as life threat, any kind of loss. And this could be either loss of a friend or a colleague, or it could be a loss of functioning. Maybe you're no longer able to do what you were able to do before. We also see moral injury, which is the type of situation where you feel like you've done something that you wished you could have done differently, or you have done something outside of your values, and you wish it could be different. And we generally see these four types of stress when a person is moving into the orange zone. And it could be just one, it could be a combination of any number of these four causes. And people often overlook the wear and tear type of stress, which builds up over time, but it can be very significant in a person's life. The features of the orange zone are more of a sense that a person has lost control of their ability to manage their stress reactions. So they may have more significant anxiety that moves into panic, more significant anger that feels like rage at times, or it's uncontrollable. Their low mood may turn into more of a sense of feeling depressed. And as I said before, the person typically expresses that they no longer feel like their normal self. And often this can come along with kind of an excess of guilt or a sense of shame, or maybe they also feel like they're blaming somebody else for what's happening in their life. In the red zone of the stress continuum model, you're more likely to have clinical mental disorders such as PTSD, depression, anxiety, or substance abuse. Those are commonly occurring mental disorders that occur when there's severe stress in a person's life. And the symptoms generally persist and they worsen over time. The distress is generally more severe, or their impairment, either socially or occupationally, is more significant. And what I have seen is that a person can have a mental disorder and still cycle in and out of these zones and still have a layer of stress reaction on top of the clinical diagnosis. So they may have been diagnosed with PTSD and have their good days and their bad days. There may be other things happening in their life that might cause more impairment or more distress based on other stressors that are happening layered on top of the clinical diagnosis. And for me, that is where caregiver stress first aid can have the most impact in a person's life. Why do we think caregiver stress first aid skills are important? And generally what we find is that most caregivers of veterans do not have round-the-clock treatment and support available. So they end up helping veterans with their stress reactions, right? Because veterans are likely to have stress reactions at all hours of the day or night, and they generally trust their caregivers, so they are more likely to talk with and receive help from caregivers than they would from somebody else in their life who doesn't know them as well. We also know that support for triggers and stress reactions makes a big difference in lives of veterans. So to be able to be aware of what to look for and how to react in simple, practical ways could make a big difference in the course of a veteran's life.
If you have any questions or need assistance, go to the PsychArmor website or call the PsychArmor support line at 844-779-2427. Thank you for completing this course and taking that one step further in learning about our American veterans.